and have actually worked, from SharePoint 2001 onwards up to SharePoint 2013. I have worked extensively on the on-premise product, and then for the past 7 or 8 years, it's been pretty much, on Office 365. So have seen, the product actually evolve from what it was to what it is today. You can actually find me on, Twitter and LinkedIn on these two, places I've highlighted. And first of all, thank you, to our sponsors. Without them, we would not be having this session. So JPAR, Pentara Technologies, Soho Dragon, and Microsoft, thanks for organizing and conducting this. And also special thanks to the organizers, because they are the ones who are actually, investing their personal time in setting up and arranging all of this. So thanks, to them as well. Uh, so we will, move on, to my session. One quick thing before this. So Kunal, that was a very informative session. Even for me, I learned quite a bit. So well done. Yeah. So thanks for that. Now, of course, we will focus on what I call as the rules of migration. And in this session, I basically want to focus on some of the key, let's say ideas or rules as such that you may want to consider when you want to perform a migration. I have, of course, based these rules based on a migration from, let's say, an on-premise or a legacy version of SharePoint to Office 365. But the rules are generic enough, so much so that you can also implement them for migration from, let's say, maybe a file share or live link or documentum or anything else to Office 365, right? And why do we want to have these rules, right? Now, typically, some of the very large migration programs that I have been a part of, right? Uh, I have actually seen these programs run for anywhere between 1.5 years to 5 years. These are the really large ones. And what happens when a project runs for this kind of a duration is some of the decisions that are made at the very initial stage of the project, people tend to forget them, when you're at the halfway stage or at the later stage, and then a lot of questions come up like, oh, why are we doing this? Why is this migrated like this? And sometimes even the users of the site will kind of come up with a lot of issues or even escalations and saying that this is not what we accepted and this is not what we wanted. And to kind of ensure that all of these things are addressed and uh, and also ensuring that things are clearly defined at the very beginning. Uh, in the projects that I'm involved in, what I typically recommend is what is known as a migration rule book. So this rule book is going to contain end-to-end definition of how our migration is going to be structured, how every artifact that we come across will be migrated. For example, it could be something like permissions, like pages. What happens to the workflow, or what happens to the JavaScript? How will each of these components be handled in the migration? So the options and the expected behavior is clearly documented. This, of course, we arrive at not just ourselves, right? We have the initial draft, but this is discussed with all the key stakeholders from the business, the IT, as well as the end users, and we sign it off together. And this kind of then becomes the reference for the migrations going forward. Uh, this need not be a one-time activity. You could, of course, revise it as and when there are significant changes introduced by Microsoft. Maybe there is a new template or something available that you want to use, so you would go and update it. But that really is the crux of the migration rules, right? So before we get into the rules itself, I want to talk about a few things to set the stage. And this would become more relevant as we start looking at the rules a couple of slides from now. When you look at any migration program, you can actually split the activities into three large buckets. First, of course, is the pre-migration. Then you have migration, and of course, post-migration. So I have tried to indicate, over here, and some of the key activities that happen in each of them. And you would also notice that I have tried to indicate the arrow size, but that size kind of reduces as we go from one stage to the other. And that is primarily to indicate that the effort or the focus that we put in should be a lot more in the pre-migration, stage of the project. And if we are able to do a really high quality, work over there, this will definitely ensure that the subsequent stages of migration and post-migration becomes, very smooth. So in pre-migration, typically, you gather the inventory, you kind of uh, try to identify what should be migrated, like who owns the content, which department, which division, these things belong to. How do we, schedule the migration? How do we kind of, split the content into multiple batches, right? And so on and so forth. So this is actually, a lot of work. And more often than not, what I have seen is people tend to underestimate or don't give a lot of importance over here, which then ends up causing problems later on. And uh, having been through, multiple migration programs, I can only say that the better or, the higher the focus in the first part, the smoother and more easygoing is going to be the migration and post-migration, right? Um, I won't go through all the steps and all that. I think those are all self-explanatory, but at least to set the context and drive home the point. Okay. So we will now start looking at, the rules as such. And the first one, of course, is migration filter, right? So what do I mean by filter? So this is actually, to kind of define among the terabytes of content that we would have to migrate, what should we migrate? Should we migrate everything? No, not the case. We have to kind of come up with filter conditions which will help us identify what is the most relevant content that needs to actually be migrated. Some of the most common filters that we can readily, come up with is when was the content on a specific site last modified? If the modification has happened in the last, let's say, 12 months or 18 months, then yes, by default, mark the site for migration, right? But if the modification is, let's say, more than 18 months or 2 years ago, then the question that we need to try and ask the business users is why is it that no modification has happened? And there might be cases, for example, maybe in some R&D or HR policies, the content update is not very frequent, but those content are still consumed, pretty much every day. So your leave policy, for example, will not change every month. It's kind of set in stone for most people. So sites like that, right, won't have a lot of updates. But that is where we really have to have the discussion. And to have a scope defined is where we use the last modified filter. And the second one that we have, of course, is last accessed, right? Uh, by default in SharePoint, object model, we don't get this, but there are ways in which you can actually extract this information. As you know, SharePoint, especially on on-premises, if you have access to IIS logs and so on, uh, if the operations team is kind of capturing this log, we can ask them to provide the log for the last 3 months or 6 months, and then kind of look at which of the sites where modification has not happened are still actually being visited by users. So it gives you, some data to work with. The third one is very important, the presence or the availability of an owner. So every site that we have should have clearly defined primary and secondary owners. If we don't have an owner that is present in the admin group, or the person there is no longer the owner, then we have to come up with some rules. Look at who is making frequent modifications to the content, right? Talk to them and decide upon the owner. And the clear rule that we have is if there is no owner available, that content will not be migrated. In scenarios like this, what we do is we put up a banner on these sites saying that, hey, we notice that your site does not have an owner identified. Note that, if you don't respond to us, uh, we will lock the site so that nobody can access it. And of course, it will not be migrated. So we use mechanisms like these to kind of, send the message to the business users and get their participation, on the migration programs. And sometimes what happens is, some users would just go and create a blank or a dummy site. They will call it testing site 123 or something. And so those, can be filtered out. And the last point here, of course, sometimes sites have just, one library or one document, and doesn't really make sense migrating it. If it's just a handful of documents on a site, you can actually move it as a separate library, elsewhere, and forget the whole site migration itself. So these are some things. So over here, you can also actually come up with some more filters which are unique to specific customers. For example, organizations will go through mergers and acquisitions. There might be demergers. So you might have content from a specific demerger that is no longer relevant or required. Those can be identified and deleted. Even some acquisitions or sometimes some project-related data uh, need not be migrated, but can be archived. So when we kind of define the process of migration, we would send out a questionnaire to the owners that we have identified, right? Stating that, hey, we noticed that these are the sites for which you are the owner. Do you want to migrate, archive, or delete them, right? So we ask them these questions, and that kind of forms the input for the overall, migration itself. Now you can imagine this is not something that can happen in a couple of days or so. It actually, kind of takes time uh, to have these, communications sent out, getting the response, reaching out, having a discussion. And that is why I was saying that as a part of pre-migration, we need to kind of, put in a lot more effort and focus. So that's a quick bit on migration filters. We'll move on to the second part, what we call as the topology, of the tenant itself. Uh, as a best practice, what we typically do when it comes to migration is we ask, a lot of metadata to be populated by the key stakeholders of each of, the departments. We also, like I said, send out questionnaires to the owners, asking them to fill out some details if the details are not already available by the existing operations team. Different companies are in different stages of, migration maturities. And typically, today, when somebody wants to come and create a new site collection, we would ask them information like, which business unit do you belong to? Does the site belong to? Which division is it? And depending upon the complete structure, of the company, how many units, how many subunits, how many divisions, we ask them to fill all of those details, and this is captured. And we use this for both the migration of existing sites as well as for the request process to create new sites, right? So when we get all of this, this serves a lot of purposes. First one is when we look at the the request to create a new site collection. If I say, okay, I am from HR, this is under HR, I am part of the salary and pension department, then the application that we have for provisioning will actually give a response and say that, hey, look, in this department that you have selected, these 15 sites are already available. Here is the title, here is the description of the sites. Are you sure you want to create a new site, or do you want to, use an existing library or create a new library in one of the existing sites? So we have this kind of an interaction that happens. And in scenarios where you want to have an approval for each of the divisions, you can have an approver in place. So the requester, when he requests for a new site, it goes to the approver, who will then check whether the request is really valid. If it is valid, he will approve the creation. If not, he would respond back to the requester saying that for your business requirement, please create a new library in this site or create a folder in an existing library, right? So all of this is possible. And when you also have this type of data, we can create a wonderful site directory. So tomorrow when somebody comes to your intranet portal, right, they would want to know, okay, in each division, what are the sites I can see? Where do I find this type of information? And this kind of a directory, can be beautifully created. We have some wonderful, SPFX components in the PNT gallery which help you create this directory. But for you to create the directory, you need the underlying data. So we kind of capture it as a part of, the pre-migration activity. We do that. And one other practice we do when it comes to this, the site creation itself is not to include any title or any word in the URL, right? Uh, we kind of make it, some generic number like SC for site collection, and then it's just a number that will, increment for every subsequent site that is created, irrespective of what department or unit it belongs to. Like SC001, 002, it will go on. Now, logically, of course, in our site directory, we know that this site collection belongs to this department, this unit. There is no hard link to the URL and the site itself. It's just a logical thing in the database that we have. So tomorrow somebody will come and say, hey, you know, this site or this department is now moving to some other business unit, or this project site that we have is changing the department, and so on. So in scenarios like that, there is no, difficulty or no issue with changing the URL of the site collection and so on. You just have to change the relation in the database. Now, of course, we have the ability to rename site collections. It's there. It also creates a redirection, but that's kind of a messy thing that you don't really have to get into if you can have a system like this that is implemented, right? Uh, you can, of course, have a title, description, title of the site can be updated, modified, doesn't matter. But the URL, really should not matter. And this actually has helped save us a lot of trouble later on. So that is something on the topology of the site itself. Now we look at permissions. And I can tell you that in almost every migration program, this is pretty much the most painful part for us to handle. Uh, Even when it comes to the normal migration itself, any tool that you use today, right? Doesn't matter whether it is ShareGate, Metalogix, AvePoint, whatever. All of them will migrate everything, perfectly. And I don't have to worry about whether all documents or all list items are moved and so on. I know for sure it's there. Permissions also, all of them move, as a part of the migration. But for the business users, the only thing that they are usually worried about is, do I still have access on the source? I had access over here. I don't. How do I manage it? And so on. And some of the observations that we have seen is the person who is managing a site today is usually not the one who created the site or who managed it before. The current person, the current owner, has inherited the site from somebody else. He would have no clue on why these groups are present, why 100 people have access to this library, why something is broken. But he would say, hey, I don't want to touch it. I don't know what will break, just move it as it is. And this is usually how the discussions go. And here we actually, kind of have a very detailed discussion with the key stakeholders, and we provide to them three options. And we say that, look, this is actually, the migration program is an opportunity to do a complete cleanup of this mess that you have. And we can actually assist you in, three possible ways. The first way is, as a part of the pre-migration activity, we have gathered from you all who the primary owner is, who the secondary owner is. So we will migrate the content without permissions, but we will give these two people the ownership rights, right? And they can either, after migration, go and populate the permissions, into the default group of owner, member, visitor, and manage it going forward. But if they can't do that, they can fill, maybe an Excel sheet, or sometimes we have Power App forms or .NET applications where we ask the owner to fill applications in them. And we then use the data that they submit to us in those applications to populate the permissions after the migration is complete. So we make it a part of the post-migration activity. We do that. And we show them the advantage that, look, by default, SharePoint gives you only these, three groups, right? And maintaining permissions is so damn simple over here. So you can do that. And this has actually worked very well. Sometimes when we know we can't agree to that, what we do is we come up with certain rules, to map the existing SharePoint groups as well as people added directly into the three groups. So we look at the permission level. Does it have read, right? Or does it have owner? If it is read or owner, they are all put into the same group, right? And if it is something in between, like contribute but not delete and all that, we just give it contribute rights, right? And if there are broken permissions, we typically have the discussion and try to understand why is something broken and is it really required, right? In 70-80% of the cases, it is actually not at all required. They don't need it, right? And they don't even know why it was done in the first place. And also this cleanup is good because what happens is people who have permission have actually moved on to some other department. They should not be having the rights, or they have people who are not, added but are not present in the organization anyway. So these kind of things come into picture. And also when you do a migration without permissions, right, it's much faster. So you have a better throughput. So we kind of do this cleanup. This makes the migration process, a little more complicated. But what we try and do is to automate all of these things. And the value that we then are able to give to the business is tremendous. Of course, what you have to keep in mind is some of the areas are really very sensitive, maybe HR or R&D or legal and finance. These kind of sites that belong over there, we don't kind of suggest this. We say, okay, because it's a site that is in the sensitive category, we migrate things as it is. So those are some exceptions, but these are the things that we agree with the business user before the migration itself. So in the questionnaire, we ask, do you want to migrate permissions, yes or no? Here is the link to the a document which explains what happens, when you don't. So we have detailed sessions with, all people in the organization who are part of the migration, explain to them, and cleaning up these kind of, things is what really starts making a difference post migration. Right? That's on the permissions part. Yeah. And this is also, a kind of a very painful discussion after permissions that we tend to have. Uh, should you actually, move to a modern site? I'm on classic. This classic can be on either, the legacy on-premise stuff, or also if you're doing a tenant to tenant migration, do you want to now move it to modern, right? Now it's very clear, at least looking at the direction in which Microsoft going, that modern is where all the investment is happening, all the features are coming over there. Classic is still going to be supported, but modern gets all the new things, right? So it's definitely a no-brainer to move there. But what are some of the challenges that are faced by the users when they have to move to modern? First of all, the concept of subsites or sub-subsites are no longer present. And here we have had a lot of discussions with the business users, right? Why do they want a subsite? What is the driver for them? And why they are not able to directly answer this, but as you start probing them further, you can actually kind of distill the answer into 2 points. One, when you create subsites, the permissions can be shared. I create a SharePoint group and I can manage the permissions in a central place. The second one is navigation. You would either get a breadcrumb, or if you go to view all site content, you would see the subsites, belonging there, and that would also, help. These usually are the two main pain points, for subsites. But other than this, there is really nothing else that prevents us from flattening the hierarchy. And what we do is we explain to the users on how we can solve this. For maintaining permissions in a central place, what we would do as a part of the migration program is we would create AD groups, right? Populate the AD groups with the members of the SharePoint group that they had, and make the AD groups, either the owner or the member or the visitor on the subsites. So as a part of the migration, we handle it. And the owners now have to only go and manage the AD groups. So you want to add or remove a person, make the change in one AD group, and that's it. You don't have to worry about the 100 or so subsites that you had before, which we have moved to site collections. They will still work, the same way. So that is something that we do. For the navigation, what we try and do is, if you remember, I spoke about the site directory, right? It's kind of linked to that. So the kind of experience that they wanted of seeing the subsites belonging to a specific division, which was the site collection, is still available, but the experience is now far, far better. We provide the link to the site directory in the header or the footer, right? And they can still see the relation and they can navigate around, right? So that is actually done. And if the customer is becoming very difficult to talk about, then you have to bring in some other points to talk about why you have to have things defined at a site collection level and not subsites. Now there are a lot of things. For example, when you look at security and compliance, right? Kunal spoke about retention labels, sensitivity labels. When you want to define a policy for retention or sensitivity, they are defined at a site collection level. You can't define them at a subsite level, right? So that is one. And the other one is, let's say there is a problem in one of the site collections. You have to have in one of the subsites, let's say there's a problem and you want to have a backup restored. And if you raise a ticket to Microsoft, they will actually restore the whole site collection on the live site. So you can't say that take the backup of the production site, restore it on my dev or staging tenant. That cannot happen. It has to happen on the live site only. I mean, I have been through this process. So to give you some details on what happened, when we performed the migration, right, it was done, it was being used by the business users. After 1 month or so, somebody by mistake executed the old migration script. It overwrote. Okay, it's not even replacing or creating a new version. This is an Azure job, right? It overrode the live content on the production site. So we immediately had to go to Microsoft and say replace it. And he said, I can only replace the whole site collection. And ours, in this case, we had to see that, okay, take a backup now so that we have the reference, restore the backup from Microsoft, and then compare. And then it was a big messy thing, but it gave us a valuable point for further discussions of maintaining the hierarchy separately. And then, of course, the most important part is the pages itself, right? You have classic pages for both team sites as well as publishing sites, but modern, it's just your site pages experience that you have. How do you actually migrate it? Right now, there is the modernization tool that does a pretty good job to a large extent of converting the pages. You can also, of course, build on top of that tool to handle your own custom requirements of moving across data. It's going to be a painful thing, no doubt, but a migration program is typically the best time to do it, because after migration you would anyway nobody would bother to invest the time and effort. But if you're able to do it, then the value to the business users is huge. So so using the scripting tool, both the PNP modernizer as well as your own addition on top of it, which we have done to handle our customer specific requirements. You can use the API to create a modern page, copy the web part content, and where you have a mapping of web parts available, move them over. So usually 70-80% of the cases the data comes over just fine. You might have maybe 10 or 20% painful cases, but that is okay. That is where the migration team, as a part of hypercare or post migration activity, will address it. But the value to the business user is immense, because all the modern features, the responsiveness, the ability to kind of stay with the latest greatest from Microsoft, it's all there. And we as a migration program are making it happen. So these are some of the the value additions that we suggest, right? And we take them through this, we show them how it works, we define it as the rule, and we have seen the benefits of doing those things, right? Right. So as an extension of this, right, we have the site template, and what I mean over here is at a very broad level, right? Because on legacy you would have publishing sites, team sites with publishing feature enabled. Sometimes people would have created their own custom site definitions, project sites, and so on and so forth. But broadly, on the modern experience, we would classify it as either a team site or a communication site. And this is where our questionnaire to the owners actually comes in. So along with capturing information like which business unit, department, and so on, we also ask them, what is the purpose of this site? Is it, for collaborating? Is it for project work? Or is it to have communication, to have some announcement or news to the business users. And we use information like that to kind of categorize what template should be used. We can, of course, as a part of migration, still provision different types of templates for projects, or business units and so on. But the division that I'm basically referring to is, should it be a communication or a team site? Because the experience, at least for the pages and so on, are a little bit different. And we do that. We show them, what are the key differences, but we try to have a consistent experience, at least on the homepage. So every homepage on all the sites, right, all team sites, communication sites, will be consistent. So for business users who go from one site to the other, it's not like as if the homepage will drastically change and you will have something totally different. It's going to be composed, it's going to be consistent. So if a person knows to navigate around one site in one department, he will be able to do the same on a different site in a different department, right? And if the business user can't, kind of provide this, then we look at the type of content that is present on the source site. Do they have a lot of documents? Do they have, a lot of pages, right? We kind of use that to decide what the template should be, and then we, kind of perform the migration, right? So we do that. And what we also do is, in a few of the projects that are in the recent past that I have been in, right, uh, where I have to do a sales pitch to a customer, I just use the SharePoint lookbook, right? We have some 15, 20 examples there. So I create the portal there. And I also use the PNP internet portal provided by VESA and, Polo. And a combination of the internet portal over there and also the lookbook usually satisfies up to 80-90% of the customer requirements for intranet portal design for both team sites and the portal itself. They're like, okay, this is good enough. And maybe just 5 or 10% of the requirements is something that we have to build. That's it. This is, usually how it has been for the past 2 or 3 years now. And this is the tremendous value of the PNP community we have. So many components, so many things are already available. There is really no need for you to go and develop something and reinvent stuff. I mean, it's very rare. That is the trend that I'm beginning to see. Right, that's one. Uh, and then of course metadata. Now, in the previous session, Kunal spoke about findability, being a concern. Like to today, as you see, there is an explosion of content, right? Terabytes and terabytes of content are being generated every day. But on the flip side, finding the information that you want to see becomes a problem. It becomes a challenge, and this is where metadata comes in. Now, what we try and do as a part of the migration exercise is to enrich the data where possible and where it makes sense, right? What I mean by enrichment is we try and use standardized content types. We provide some default values for the content types, when we migrate. The values will come from the questionnaire, right? Which is the department, which is the business unit, which is the project work the site belongs to, and the values from the site will inherit at the document libraries. And we can straightforward way do this where on the source custom content types have not been used. So if it's the document content type, we can just replace that with our own content types, and we don't target everything, only specific sites where really useful relevant content is there. For example, HR policies, right? So things like that, we try to enrich. And in some extreme cases, our solution has also involved using the Azure AI service. So what we do is we take a Word document, we send this document to an Azure function, which will split the document into bunches of 5,000 characters. And these 5,000 characters are then sent to the AI text analytics service, which will give us back the keywords. So the AI service has a limitation of 5,000 characters. I mean, it was there when I last checked. I don't know if it has changed now. But we split the document into multiple, chunks of 5,000, get all the keywords for all the chunks, and we would then use these keywords to populate, the metadata column for the document library. You don't have to take all the keywords and populate it. As a part of your, your enterprise taxonomy setup, you can have certain keywords defined. And if the keywords coming from the AI service match this, then only those keywords should be populated, right? So you can do both, but this way your metadata is enriched, and you can also then set up your filters in the search center to help you with the findability. So these are some things that we are able to do today, and which we have done. And again, this then creates a lot more value to the business users. You are not just migrating whatever junk was there. So rubbish in, rubbish out, that, right? So we try and make a difference. And these are some of the things that you can do as a migration program. Right. Broken links. This is, I think, the fundamental problem that almost any migration will have, especially when you move from on-premise to the cloud. The URL will change, right? Maybe you have something like a contoso.intra on-premise, but now you have contoso.sharepoint.com, and the thousands of documents, references, all of the URLs would break. So how do you actually handle it? So there are, I think, some interesting solutions that you can actually do to address the broken link. We have actually, done solutions like these for customers. So what is it that you can do? So the first scenario you have is the migration is in progress, which means that the on-premise environment will continue to remain for another 6 months or 1 year, right? And content will be migrated, but the old content should not be accessed by users. So for a scenario like this, what we have is a custom HTTP handler, or you can do URL rewriting itself, that for a site that is migrated, right, if a request comes to the on-premise SharePoint farm, it will actually see the URL. It will refer to our migration database, where for every site, for every file that is migrated, we have the corresponding source and target URL. So the HTTP handler will see the incoming URL. If it is migrated, it will refer to the database, and it will send the user to the to the new system. It will do that. And the second scenario is when the on-premise environment has actually been, let's say, completely migrated and it's on the verge of getting decommissioned. So what we then do is the DNS that you have for the on-premise server, right? What contoso.intranet, we kind of point it to a simple .NET, application of ours. So the .NET application will respond to the previous SharePoint farm DNS that you had, and any incoming URL that comes in, it will actually again do the same thing, refer to the database. Then it will show a nice message to the user saying that your site or your file has been migrated. You are moving there in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? And please update your reference to point to the new location. You can do that. And because this is going to be automated, the users will not feel the pain of having any migration. And you can also refer to the logs and say that these are the people, these are the sites that are actually using the URL redirection. You can talk to them later and have them update the material over a course of time. But the migration itself will not really cause a problem. And the third option that we have over here is, of course, updating the links, programmatically. So we are able to use either an Office add-in or maybe even a PowerShell script, which will use your Word object model to open the Word document, understand how many hyperlinks are there, and compare the hyperlink against your, your SharePoint URL, and update it using our migration database, which contains the URLs as a reference. So we have done all of this. And the migration database, I keep referring to this, but basically, whatever migration tool of choice you use will create a migration log. And all of those logs are saved and put into this database of ours. So at any point of time, we know which file was moved from which location in the source to which location in the target. That really becomes our response. I mean, the response for these kind of requests that come in. So using the logs, we are able to create some really powerful applications. But I think you can actually appreciate this technically to implement this. It's not a big deal, right? I mean, maybe in the expert programmers among you can create a solution like this in 2 hours, maybe faster, right? You look at the incoming URL, query database. This is the incoming URL. Give me the outgoing URL. That's it. That's the logic. But a simple thing like that
Skanda,
ends
we
up
have 5 minutes
having,
left.
yeah, I'm done. Yeah, ends up having tremendous value for the business users, right? So these are the things that we define as rules and we have. And this is the last slide, so we are on time. But I want to talk about some things that we should not overlook. Now, the first one is very interesting, quick parts. In fact, this was introduced, I think, if I remember correctly, in SharePoint 2010, where you can have a document panel. So inside a Word document, you're seeing some data, but that data is linked to a SharePoint list, right? And what happened for us in one of the migrations was we did this migration, right? And that connection or that link was broken. And around 15,000 documents had this problem, and we had to fix it. No migration tool does this, and this was a unique challenge that we had. So what we then did was we had to use the word object model and go and create a template for a quick part, and use the object model to go through the documents and replace the connection. So you don't see this very often. I've seen this only once in the last 7 or 8 years, but that is something that I thought you should know. We can use the word object model to address it. Checked out files, you have to create a report, and you also have checked out files which have no previous checked in version, right? That also, we generate reports and we share with the owners. We show them how they have to check it in. Um, we also have some templates for blogs and wikis, which is there on the legacy system. But in the modern side of things, there is no direct replacement. But what we do is we use a combination of your modern site, and we bring in solutions like Yammer where required. And where possible, we try to recreate the content on the modern platform or on Yammer. And in some extreme cases where we can't do that migration, we just archive the old content as it is, right? But for the similar solution, we create a new experience, a kind of a combination of maybe a modern communication site and Yammer where required. We say, okay, going forward, use this, but your old reference content is also here. And also some other things like alerts and so on, we can't migrate. So we just communicate this beforehand. So we ask the users to create the alerts themselves post migration. There are also other things that I have not spoken about yet, but those are the usual ones like your info path forms, SharePoint designer workflow. Designer workflow, I think most of you should be aware. I think as of November are no longer supported, so you can't migrate them anyway. Info path forms, what we typically do is uh, where it is business critical, we convert them to Power App, but the other ones we just move it off as it is, and they would then eventually die a slow death. So these were some of the key things that I wanted to cover. I know it's been theoretically a heavy session, but these are the rules, the key components of the migration rule book. And of course, some customers would have some other specific things which are unique to them. But whatever we discussed is really the high order bit that is common to almost any migration program. And I hope you found this useful. These were some of the learnings from the last 7 or 8 years of migrations that we have done. And yeah, if any of you have any questions, yeah, please let me know, and I will try to answer.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. The first one is from Suresh. When migrating to on-prem to online, how to handle complex Excels with multiple links navigating to on-premise locations?
Yeah, so I don't think there is an easy way out of this, right? So when you have Excel files with macros built in or links that are pointing to some other sheet to calculate and so on, you have to have the discussions with the business user beforehand, inform them that these things will break, right? I don't think there is a way to easily identify it. There is, of course, a possibility that you can write a script which will open every Excel sheet using the Excel object model and check whether a macro is there or whether a link is there. But this then becomes a question.
Skanda, I'm sorry you got muted. Can you unmute yourself? Skanda, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yeah, now you're audible. Sorry about that.
Okay, not sure how I got muted. Yeah. All right. So what I was saying is there is no easy, way for this. That at least I'm aware of. And what I have done in my projects is inform the business user that these things will break, right? Those links or macros will stop working, but you let us know the files that you have or where these kind of content is present. And as a part of the migration, we will manually update it for you, or you can do it yourself post migration. Uh, you can, of course, check the possibility to use Excel object model to see whether you are able to generate a report, but I'm not sure how much mileage you will be able to get out of it.
Okay, the next question is, don't you think migrating without permission, it will increase owner or project team tasks and leads to increase the migration timeline?
Mm, it will definitely increase the work done by the migration team. Okay. Migration timeline, it won't increase because from a pure migration perspective, migrating without permissions is much, much faster. And this is where we actually go down to the pre-migration phase I spoke about, right? I gave a lot of emphasis that you have to invest the time there. So you capture all of this information, the effort, the work done by the migration team is a lot more. But see, this is my view towards any project as such. I take on the complexity on the project team, right? The complexity is handled by me and my team, but the benefit of that is seen by the customer, right? So see, look at it this way. Let's say you belong to, Infosys, TCS, Cognizant, and so on. All of you are vying for the same project, right? You want to make your job easy and make it difficult for the business, or you want to flip it and say, no, all of these things are difficult, but I will solve it for you. Give the project to me. How do you want to, have the discussion? So yes, I take on the complexity on the project side, but the value to the business is tremendous. I have seen the benefits, so I can tell you, you can try it out and see, how it goes.
Okay, the last question, we have 2 minutes. Can we use this model as a reference in case of business merger between online tenants, and how do we tackle guest links in case of business mergers?
Yeah, I mean, you can actually use this. Like I said, most of these things are generic enough, so you should be able to pick it up. But guest links and so on, especially when you bring into account external shares and things like that, uh, for that you have to, kind of generate a report as a part of the inventory gathering phase that you have. These are some of the things that will come in when you do a tenant to tenant migration. How many sites, are externally shared? Who are the users? All of them, would have to be sent a new invite on the new tenant post migration. Those old content would be removed away anyway. So that becomes an extra element that you have to handle. But yeah, can be done.
Okay, thank you, Ramna. Thanks for the great talk. We will move to the next speaker soon. And the